Tonight the monsters in my head are screaming so damn loud. But I built walls so high so they never even make a sound. It's a mask, it's a lie, it's the only home I've ever known. 'Cause being who I really am is only long. I am not okay.
Okay, I think I fixed it.
I have so much to say.
Oh my goodness, that was weird. Welcome, Dena Jo.
I went back in afterwards and it showed you were live. And when I went in, I was the only person in there. It was weird.
Yeah, I've had it happen before where it's like it actually was just me in there and I was in the host spot, but it was somebody else's show.
Yeah.
It was really weird. I've had that happen. You have to like restart my phone and log out of Podbeam and then log back in. I guess when you have more than one device, it keeps you logged in, I guess. It's really weird. Well, Boundaries, episode 15, Dena Jo. This one's how to measure success with boundaries. But I'll give a little summary of last episode 14, resistance to boundaries. That was a really good one. I liked that one. That was a really good one. My favorite part in that one was hold on, I have it right here. It was the fear of the unknown. That was one of my favorite ones among many in that one. Yeah. Fear of the unknown. This little part here on page 263. Read just one paragraph on here. Another powerful internal resistance to setting boundaries is the fear of the unknown. Being controlled by others is a safe prison. We know where all the rooms are. As one woman said, I didn't want to move out of hell. I knew the names of all the streets. Mm-hmm. Setting boundaries and being more independent is scary because it is a step into the unknown. Exactly. I was always scared of the unknown.
Yeah, because boundaries. You don't know how the other people are going to react. That's the biggest thing.
Right. Especially angry people, too.
Yeah.
Setting boundaries.
They don't like it.
No.
Yeah, so you can listen to chapter 14 on the download and catch up.
That's right.
To where we are on chapter 15.
Yeah.
Did you want me to start reading, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Chapter 15, how to measure success with boundaries. Jean sat at her kitchen table, teacup in hand, amazed. It was an unfamiliar sensation, but a pleasant one. Her mind wandered back to the events of the morning. Her 8-year-old son, Brian, had begun the day with his usual wake-up shenanigans. He sulked and pouted his way to the breakfast table, announcing, I'm not going to school, and no one's going to make me. Normally, Jean would have either tried to talk Brian into attending school or blow up at him in frustration. However, this morning was different. Jean simply said, You're right, honey. No one can make you go to school. That has to be something you choose to do. However, if you don't choose to go to school, you are choosing to stay home, stay in your room all day with no TV. But that's something you'll have to decide for yourself, like you did last week. Brian hesitated in his tantrum. He was thinking about when his mom had made him stay in his room and he missed dinner, when he had refused to set the table. Finally, he said, Well, I'll go, but I don't have to like it. Absolutely, Jean agreed. You don't have to like a lot of things like school, but I'm sure you've made the right choice. She helped, Brian on with his jacket and watched him walk to the carpool right outside. Not 10 minutes later, Jean had received a call from her husband, Jerry, who had driven to work early. Honey, he said, "I just found out I have a meeting after work. The last time I showed up late for dinner, there wasn't any. Think you could save some this time?" Jean laughed. "Last time you never called to let me know. I really appreciate you telling me in advance. I'll feed the kids and you and I will eat together later. My son makes it to school even with the cranky attitude. My husband calls me to inform me about the schedule changes. I'm dreaming, aren't I, Lord?" Jean wasn't dreaming. She was, for the first time in her life, experiencing the rewards of setting and maintaining clear boundaries in her life. A great deal of hard work and risk taking had gone into them, but it was worth it. She rose up from the table and began to ready herself to work. Jean saw visible, demonstrable proof that her boundaries worked was bearing fruit in her life. Things were different. But how did she get from point A, boundarylessness, to point B, mature boundaries? Can we measure our boundaries development? Yes, specifically, orderly changes herald the emerging of mature boundaries. It's helpful to be aware of them. The following 11 steps allow you to measure your growth to see where you are in your development. Use this chapter as a guide to step in your growth. Excuse me.
Step
Step.
one. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. You can read. I could take a break.
And that first step, step one, is resentment. Our early warning signal. Randy had never before felt irritated at his best friend Will's sarcastic digs. Resentment was a new sensation for him. Being the butt of the jokes had always been easy for him. Good-natured Randy could roll with the punches, but when Will came up to him at the church and said in front of several observers, "Are you going to buy smaller clothes or putting on weight?" Randy didn't laugh it off. He said nothing to his friend, but the remark stuck inside him. He was embarrassed and hurt, couldn't shake it off as he had for so many years. This never got to me before, Randy thought to himself. Why is it getting to me this time? Maybe I'm getting too sensitive. One of the first signs that you're beginning to develop boundaries is a sense of resentment, frustration, or anger at the subtle and not so subtle violations in your life. Just as radar signals approach, just as radar signals the approach of a foreign missile, your anger can alert you to a boundary violation in your life. Randy had come from a family who largely avoided conflict and disagreement. Arguments were replaced by compliance. When Randy was in his 30s, he sought therapy for a long-standing eating disorder. To his surprise, instead of discussing diet and exercise plans, the therapist had asked him about how he reacted to controlling people in his life. At first, Randy couldn't think of a controlling person, but after some consideration, he thought of Will. Will teasing Randy. Will Will humiliating Randy in front of friends. Will taking Randy for granted. Will taking advantage of Randy. Those memories were not simply intellectual pictures in Randy's mind. They carried hurt, anger, and resentment. They were the seeds of boundaries in Randy's life. People who can't get angry when they are being violated, manipulated, or controlled have a genuine handicap. No warning light alerts them to boundary problems. This light, when functioning properly, should turn on quickly when you are being attacked. The Bible describes anger in terms of heat. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Exodus 4:14. Therefore the Lord's anger burned against his land. That's in Deuteronomy 29:27. Anger is like a fire that shoots up within your heart, letting you know there's a problem to confront. Our inability to get angry is generally a sign that we are afraid of the separateness that comes with telling the truth. Wow. We fear that saying the truth about our unhappiness with someone will damage the relationship. But when we acknowledge that truth is always our friend, we often give ourselves permission to be angry. So before you say anything confrontive, even before you set your first boundary, examine your heart. Ask yourself, do I have permission to feel angry when I'm controlled by others? Am I aware when I'm being violated? Can I hear my early warning signal? If so, you're on the right track. If not, this is a good time to work on finding a safe place to tell the truth. As you are better able to be honest about differences and disagreements, you'll be better able to allow your anger to help you.
All right. Step number 2 is a change of taste, becoming drawn to boundary lovers. It has been a full 12 months since Tammy and Scott had changed churches. They were reflecting back on the last year. They attended their former church since their marriage several years ago. It was doctrinally correct and an active fellowship. But one problem that didn't go away was the church members' attitude towards attendance at church functions. They placed a great deal premium on being present at each other's gatherings, from choir specials to nighttime services to weekly Bible studies. When Scott and Tammy had to miss meetings, a conflict arose. They recalled the night old friends from out of town came to visit them. Tammy called Janice, her Bible study leader, to tell her that they'd missed that evening's meeting. I think there's a problem in commitment here, Tammy, Janice had replied. If we really meant something to you, you'd be here. But you just go and do what you have to do. Oh, okay. Tammy was furious and hurt. Janice had shamed her for wanting a night off with her friends. It was this inability of her group to understand the word that subsequently fueled the couple's move to another church. Now, a year later, she and Scott were pleased with their decision. Though their present fellowship was also conservative and active, stressing lots of involvement, they didn't become critical or judgmental when members needed time off for some reason or another. How how's this for contrast? Scott said to Tammy. I called Mark, our men's prayer breakfast leader, yesterday. I'd just flown in on a red eye from LA. I told him I'd be shot if I went to the breakfast. What do you think he told me? What are you doing on the phone with me? He said. Get yourself in bed and catch some Z's. That's the sort of understanding makes me want to be there the next time. At one time, both Scott and Tammy thought their first church attitude was correct. They weren't even aware that others could understand their no. Now, a year later, they couldn't conceive of returning to the situation. People with immature, limit setting abilities often find themselves involved with boundary busters. They may be family members, colleagues, spouses, church members, or even friends. The boundary confusion seems normal to them, so they aren't very aware of the destruction it causes for themselves and others. As injured as boundary injured individuals begin developing their own boundaries, however, a change occurs. They become attracted to people who can hear their no without being critical, without getting hurt, without personalizing it, without running over their boundaries in a manipulative and controlling fashion. People who will simply say, okay, we'll miss you. See you next time. The reason for this shift is hidden in the way we have been constructed by God. We were created free of one purpose, to love and to be meaningfully close to God and to others. And overall, these virtues put on love. which binds them all together in perfect unity. Colossians 3:14. This fundamental truth underscores the deepest parts of our heart. And when we find ourselves in which we have freedom to set limits, something wonderful happens. In addition to the freedom to say no, we find the freedom to say a wholehearted, unconflicted, gratitude driven yes to others. We become attracted to boundary lovers because in them we find permission to be honest, authentic, and loving individuals. To a boundary injured person, people can say a clear no, sometimes seem curt and cold. But as the boundaries become more firm and curt and cold, people change into caring, refreshing, honest people. Turn the page. Okay. We need to join with boundary lovers in deep, meaningful attachments. Boundaries can't develop in a vacuum. As we make corrections involving asking for support and understanding with these people, God gives us, through them, the grace and power to do the hard work of limit setting. This drawing to boundaried individuals extends to God. Some people will begin finding out that the holy, just God. Wait a minute, did I say it? Let me start that over. Some people will begin finding out that the holy, just God about whom they read in the Old Testament isn't so bad or scary. He's just very boundaries. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are many higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Isaiah 55:9.
What does curt mean? No, it's curt
I
and
think
cold.
it means like rude. I think it means like rude. Curt,
These,
like
I wonder if they ever
short.
went back.
Yeah.
I wonder if they ever went back and read what they wrote in this book, because a lot of
I
tongue
don't
twisters
know.
are in here.
I know. It
Like,
is hard to read.
cracks me up. All right. Well, step 3, joining the family. Curt. You're being very curt, Dena. I don't know what that means. As we find our taste changing from boundary muddled relationships to more clearly defined people, we begin developing close and meaningful connections with people who have clear boundaries. We begin either growing in boundaries in our present relationships or finding new attachments in which to invest, or both. This is a crucial phase in boundary development. Why is it so important to join the boundaried family? Mainly because, as with any spiritual discipline, boundaries can't be worked on in a vacuum. Ooh, excuse me. Ooh. We need others with the same biblical values of limit setting and responsibilities to encourage us, practice with us, and stay with us. That's what Wayne discovered. Wayne couldn't believe the change. Over the past few months, he'd become aware of this lack of boundaries at work. While other employees went home on time, he was frequently asked to stay later. He wanted to stand up to his boss and let him know that his work limits were going to become tighter and more realistic. But even time he approached his, but every time he approached his supervisor, his anxiety kept him tongue-tied and silent. Wayne disappeared of Wayne disappeared of ever developing mature work boundaries. About this time, he joined a support group at church. His relationship in the group deepened and he began to trust the members. Finally, he was able to emotionally take them with him to work the day he sat down with his boss and worked out the overtime conflict. It was the safety and support of the group that gave Wayne the strength he needed to tell the truth at work. Jesus defined fellowship as 2 or 3 people gathered in his name, saying that he would be there in their midst. That's in Matthew 18:20. It is this very combination of his spirit and the emotional memories of those who believe in us that helps us keep firm boundaries. Why? Because we know we have a spiritual and emotional home somewhere. No matter how caustic the criticism or how severe the rejection of one we're in conflict with, tongue twister, we aren't alone. And that makes all the difference in the world in boundary setting.
Yes. All right. Step 4, treasuring our treasures. Okay, after you feel safe being around people who believe that grace and truth are good, that's John 1:17, your values will start to change. You will begin to see that taking responsibility for yourself is healthy, and you will begin to understand that taking responsibility for other adults is destructive. When people are treated as objects for long enough, they see themselves as someone else's property. They don't value self stewardship because they relate to themselves in the same way that significant others have related to them. Many people are told over and over again that nurturing and maintaining their souls is selfish and wrong. After a while, they develop a deep conviction that this is true. At that point, they place little value on taking care of feelings, talents, thoughts, attitudes, behaviors, bodies, and resources God entrusted to them. This practice is taught in the scripture. We love because he first loved us. 1 John 4:19. In other words, we learn to be loving because he loved. Grace must come from the outside of us to be able to develop inside. The opposite side of this truth is what we can't love, we aren't loved. And taking the thinking further, we can't value or treasure our souls when they haven't been valued or treasured. This is a this is a key principle. Our basic sense of ourselves, of what is real and true about us, come from a significant primary relationship. That's why many people who were unloved in childhood can be inundated by caring people in their adult years, yet not be able to shake a deep sense of being worthless and unlovable, no matter how much people try to show them they are lovable. Helen's father sexually abused her in her early years. She was terribly traumatized by the molestation, but tried to keep the secret and protect the family from being upset. By her teenage years, however, Helen inadvertently began to tell the truth about her family problem in nonverbal ways. She became sexually promiscuous at a very early age. As an adult, Helen's reflected in therapy on her tumultuous teen years. I can't even remember the boys' faces. All I knew was that someone wanted something from me, and I felt it was my duty to give it to them for no other reason than that they wanted it. I felt that I had no say so in the matter. Helen had not been treasured by one of the people who she should have treasured and cherished her most. As a result, she did not treasure herself. She provided sexual services to just about anyone who requested them. She had no sense that her body and feelings were a pearl of great value. And that's Matthew 13:46, given to her by God, which she was to protect and develop. When Christians begin to value getting well, recovering, and developing themselves into the image of God, all of which are different ways of saying the same thing, a shift occurs. They begin desiring a return on God's investment. Remember the parable of the talents in Matthew 25:14-30. Taking care of themselves becomes important. Steve walked up to me excitedly one day, and he wasn't given to emotional outbursts. I knew something important was going on. He showed me his Bible, where he had been reading 1 Corinthians 8:11. So this weak brother from whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. Something is happening inside of me, he said. For years I felt guilty about reading that passage. I thought it was condemning me for leading weaker Christians into sin. Well, it doesn't say that, I replied, but you've noticed something else. I have, said Steve. I'm seeing that I'm also a brother for whom Christ died. That means I need to be careful and concerned about myself as I am about others. There's no difference between what God thinks of him and what God thinks of me. Steve had realized an important theological point. For years, Christians have been taught that protecting their spiritual and emotional property is selfish. Yet God is interested in people loving others, and you can't love others unless you have received love inside yourself. Have have you had Steve's experience? It's getting help and learning self-protection and biblical boundaries important to you? If it is, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to go through the hard work of developing good limits. You may need to spend time around people who have a mature understanding of healthy boundaries and learn from their modeling. This principle is illustrated when the psalmist says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is a wellspring of life. And that is Proverbs 4:23. When we watch over our hearts, the home of our treasures, we guard them. We are to value our treasures so much that we keep them protected. Whatever we do not value, we do not guard. The security around a bank is significantly higher than around the junkyard. Begin to list your treasures, your time, your money, feelings, and beliefs. How do you want others to treat them? How do you want others to not treat them?
Huh. I like that. When we watch over our hearts, the home of our treasures, we guard them. That's very interesting. Well, step 5,
Yes.
practicing baby nose. The group was silent after many sessions of considering the group was silent after many sessions of considering the prospect. Sharon was about to set a limit with another group member for the first time in her life. Praying silently, the group waited to see if she could become a truth teller. I had asked Sharon to mention to a group member one thing that had rubbed her the wrong way in the past few sessions. Though she was terrified, she agreed to try. At first, she said nothing, obviously gathering up courage. Then, slowly, she turned to a woman sitting next to her and said, Carolyn, I don't know how to say this, but here it goes. It bothers me when you always take the good chair group. Quickly, bad. That was a terrible impression. Quickly, she ducked her head, waiting for the rebuttal. There was none, at least not what Sharon had expected. I've been waiting for you to say something, Carolyn explained. I knew you were acting distant towards me, but I didn't know why. It helps to know, and I feel closer to you now. You took a risk to confront me. Who knows? I may even arm wrestle you for the chair. Does this sound trivial? It isn't. Given her family background of a mother who had made her feel guilty for setting limits and a father who had a rage attacks when she dared disagree, Sharon was taking a genuine plunge. For her, boundaries were out of the question until her anxiety and depression wrenched her life out of control. That's why the best possible place for Sharon to begin her boundary work was in her therapy group. Growth in setting emotional boundaries must always be at a rate that takes into account your past injuries. Otherwise, you could fail massively before you have soiled enough boundaries. Does it say soiled or solid? Massively before you have solid enough boundaries. This boundary teaching doesn't work, complained Frank in a therapy session. Why not? I asked. Well, as soon as I understood that I don't set good limits with people, I called my father the same day and gave him what for. Can you believe what he did? He hung up on me. This is great, just great. Boundaries have made things worse for me instead of better. Frank is like the overeater child who is too impatient for training wheels on his new bicycle. It's only several falls and skinned knees later that begins to entertain the possibility that he skipped some steps in his training. Here's an idea to help you navigate this step. Ask your support group or your good friends if you could work on boundaries with them. They will show you their true value in the response to your truth telling. Either way, they'll warmly cheer you on in being able to disagree and confront them, or they'll resist you. Either way, you'll learn something. A good supportive relationship cherishes no of all parties involved. The members know true intimacy is only built around the freedom to disagree. He who conceals his hatred has lying lips. Proverbs 10:18. Begin practicing your no with people who will honor it and love you for it. That's a good idea. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's step 5.
Mhm.
That's a good idea. Practice saying no. Now, how'd you do
All right.
that? Yeah.
You talk it out with
Well,
people.
yeah, that's true. Got to find someone I can do that with.
Well.
Yeah, I know, right? But so we're gonna. This is part 1, right? The end of part 1. We're gonna do part 2 next week.
Yeah.
All right, that is end of part 1. Tune in next week as we start with step 6, rejoicing in the guilty feelings on how to measure success with boundaries. Episode 15, part 2 next. Anything you want to say before we close out?
No, we'll go through step 11, mature boundaries, value-driven goal setting. So look forward to that.
All righty. Thank you very much. Y'all have a good day. Thank you for tuning in. And God bless.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Dena Jo.
You're welcome.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.